Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Christina Park. I am the Director of Guidance at Abington High School. Tonight we have Diane Place, who is the Associate Director of the Financial Aid Office over at Bridgewater State. She is an expert of this whole process. I will say, if parents, guardians, if you could take this kind of piece off of your students' shoulders, I feel like that makes their lives a lot easier. They're pretty overwhelmed with the application process. There's deadlines coming up if they're applying early action. So anytime a parent can help with the financial piece to this process just kind of helps make a smoother application season for your students. So I'm going to hand it over to Diane in a minute. This presentation is recorded by Abington Can. We are going to be posting it on the Canvas page, so you're going to be able to look back on it, ask your students to show you the Canvas page. We have a lot of great resources on there. We're also going to be posting the slides on the Canvas page as well. And then in the winter time, going into spring, that's where we send scholarships out to students. So Canvas is hugely important. If you can all take a peek at your students' Canvas page and see kind of what is there, it'll be really helpful. So without further ado, Diane.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm glad everyone could come tonight. The presentation materials are provided by MIFA, which is the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority. If you want to receive timely emails from MIFA and lots of free resources, you can scan the QR code to sign up for their emails. They're not trying to solicit anything from you, but they're really there to provide you with all the information that you really need for the path to college. So about MIFA, it's the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority. They're a not-for-profit state authority created in 1982, and their sole purpose is helping students plan, save, and pay for college. They do have a loan program as well, but that's not really the intent behind the emails. But it's worth checking out if you're looking for that type of thing. And so, yes. So we're going to talk about the different types and sources of financial aid. We're going to look at the application process, how decisions are made, paying for college, and then again, there's a ton of, or like I've been saying, a slew of free resources. I'm like, was that my mother talking in my ear? I haven't said that word in so long. So I don't know where it came from. So types and sources. So what is financial aid? It is exactly what you think it is. Money to help students and families pay for college. The three main types, grant and scholarship, which could include a waiver. That's gift aid that never has to be repaid, so that's the money that everybody wants. And then there's federal work study, which is a federal program where schools are allotted a certain amount of money, and they will award work-study funds to students as part of their package. And then the student would get a job on campus to earn the money that they've been awarded. So it's a job. I happen to really like the work-study program. It's a way for students to get engaged and maybe make some extra connections on campus. And you actually will never know where that could lead. When I was very young at the time, and I got a work-study job in the financial aid office. So who knew, where it would lead? And then the last part are federal student loans. Nobody really likes to talk about loans, but they really are an integral part of the student financial aid package. And I am going to talk a little bit more about that. So the different sources could be from federal, the state, the college or university, and then other agencies as well. So when the student completes the FAFSA, or the free application for federal student aid, they are literally applying for every type of federal aid. So that includes grants, the work study, the loans, tax incentives, and you can see all of that on studentaid.gov. All of the federal agencies end in .gov. So if you're looking for the FAFSA, you want to be sure that you're on the FAFSA application that ends in .gov. Just a little tip there. The state of Massachusetts. So when you're completing your applications, if you indicate that you and your student are legal residents of Massachusetts, your information will automatically get sent to the state. You don't need to do a separate application, where you'll be considered for grants, scholarships, tuition waivers, possibly loans. And you can look at all of those at mass.edu/OSFA. And then the college or universities that the student has listed on their FAFSA will all get that information electronically. And lots of schools have lots of money to give away, so you want to be sure that you are paying attention to all of the really important deadlines. If you walk away with nothing else tonight, but I hope that's not all you walk away with, please remember to check out those deadlines. And the way to find them is to log on to the individual colleges' websites, because they can be different, okay? And then other agencies. So you can really do a scholarship search pretty much anywhere, and I would really encourage you and your students to do that. However, I would caution about paying anyone to do a scholarship search, or say, oh, log in and for $500 we'll get you the best financial aid package, when you can get all of that for free. You don't need to pay anyone to do that for you. So $175.1 billion is the total amount of aid that students received in 2021. And that would be a combination of all of those, but that's a lot of money that students are receiving. And so we're going to talk about federal direct student loans. You will probably notice that the federal direct student loan is part of most schools' financial aid package. The federal government sets the limits on how much students can borrow. So this $5,500 here, you will be seeing that quite a bit throughout the presentation. They allow a little bit more for sophomore and then a little more for junior and senior years. The student is the sole borrower, so there's no cosigner, there's no separate application, there's no credit check. A loan could be subsidized or unsubsidized. That's okay. The difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized is that the federal government is actually covering the interest on the subsidized portion while the student is in school. And that would be what we would call need-based aid. So the student demonstrates eligibility for that. The most the student could get out of the 55 is $3,500 in subsidized, and then an additional $2,000 in unsubsidized. The unsubsidized loan is accruing interest while the student is in school. They are not required to pay it, but they certainly can, and they do have the option to just pay the interest alone while they're in school, to kind of keep that from accruing on itself. For this year, the interest rate is fixed at 4.99%, which is not the greatest interest rate that they've ever had, but it's not the worst either. If the interest rates should plummet at some time in the future, there will probably be a push for students to consolidate loans that they've already had at a lower interest rate. So that's one of the benefits with students borrowing the federal loan. Repayment, so there's no payment required while the student is in school, and there are multiple options for repayment once the student starts repaying. That's 6 months after they leave school or graduate. The basic plan is just a standard 10-year plan. If the student doesn't choose any other income-based plan, their estimated payment could be around $300 a month for 10 years, and then they're done with their loans. That's a total of a $27,000 loan if they borrowed all of these amounts here. And the estimated debt for paying it back is between $32,000 and $34,000, depending on where the interest rates go with future loans. But there are lots of options for deferment, for forbearance, forgiveness. There's a big push right now for teacher loan forgiveness for federal loans. So if students borrowed loans for their undergraduate and then they go on to teach, after they teach for so many years and they repay their loans for so many years, they can apply for so much forgiveness per year. So it's a nice program. They're also trying to push the public service loan forgiveness program right now. There's a lot of talk about that. I don't have a whole lot of detail on that piece, but the federal student loan, if a student is going to borrow, they should take the federal loans first, even if it doesn't cover the whole amount. Of course, by the same token, students are not required to take the loan if it comes as an offer. So perhaps, for instance, a student is enrolling at Bridgewater State and they're going to be commuting from home. There's a possibility that they may not need those loans, and they're not required to accept the loan to keep the grant money. So you want to keep that in mind as well. Sorry about that. So merit-based aid, a lot of colleges are leaning towards offering merit-based aid. It's awarded in recognition of the students' some achievement, so some special talent that a student may have, whether it's a scholastic, they're a high achiever, the high GPA. It could be artistic, it could be athletic. It really depends on the school and the type of endowment that they have. Generally, these scholarships are awarded through the admission process and will become part of the financial aid offer. There might be renewable requirements, and so if your student has been offered some type of merit aid, you want to ask, can this be renewed for the sophomore, junior, senior years? What do they have to do to keep it? Do they have to maintain a certain grade point average? Do they have to stay enrolled in the program in which they were admitted? So some schools will say, try to build up their science program. So they'll offer a merit scholarship to a student who's, say, like a biology major. So you want to ask, if the student switches their major to history, do they lose that? Like, is it tied to their program? So these are some questions you want to ask. So merit aid is not offered at every college, so you definitely want to be checking the websites, the details, and the deadlines, and to be sure that there are no separate applications. Once in a while, there will be one. Not always, but again, you'll always want to be check on the college's website. Okay, application deadlines could be as early as November, but we're still in that process right now. So need-based aid is basically what we do in the financial aid office, and it's based on the family's financial eligibility or need. They got away from calling it need because, who doesn't need some money to help them pay for college, right? So they've kind of gotten away from that term, so it's really eligibility. It's determined using a standardized formula, and what that means is when you complete the FAFSA, every student and parent goes through the same type of formula. So they take the family size, number of people in college, the income and assets for the whole family, and then they build in income and asset protection allowances and kind of roll it through their formula and come up with an EFC. It's very, very standard. It includes grants, loans, work study. I talked about the federal aid already before. Most financial aid is need-based, except for the merit-based. And students must be making satisfactory academic progress to retain their eligibility. So regardless of the student's financial need, if they're not making progress with their GPA, an acceptable GPA for the school, and working toward graduation by earning a certain number of credits each semester, they could potentially lose eligibility at some time in the future. There is an appeal process, so there are lots of good reasons why students don't progress. Sometimes there'll be something horrific that happens and they withdraw. So there is an appeal process, and every school, it's a federal policy, but every school has their own kind of take on it, which we're allowed to do. So just kind of keep that in mind. And so here we go, the application process. Here's a timeline for you. Again, I know I sound like a broken record. Check deadlines and required applications on each college's website. So you can do that now because at this point in time, the FAFSA has just been released, so you haven't missed anything. But you really don't want to miss anything either. So just be checking that now. Financial aid deadlines could be in line with admission deadlines, not always, but they could be. And right now, Ms. Park was talking about the early decision. Those are happening in in November. So you really want to be progressing with your applications. Standard deadlines, typically February or March. I know that the Rhode Island scholarships are typically in February, and a lot of the Massachusetts ones are in March. That's not like a, set in stone, but it's typical. So make sure you're meeting those application deadlines. If something happens and you happen to miss a deadline, I would say send an appeal to the school. If you have a really good reason why you may have missed a deadline, things happen to families. Send in, a letter to the financial aid office and, maybe ask for forgiveness and say, it was a one-time thing, I missed the deadline, is there anything that you can do to help us out? You can always send in an appeal. But really try to meet the deadlines, it's very important. Use the application manager from MIFA to stay organized, and that's really key. I'm going to talk about verification in a few minutes, and if verification can be a little bit complicated, but if you stay organized, you can really get a handle on it, okay? And so the FAFSA. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a school presenting, and I was talking about the FAFSA, and I forgot what the real name of the application was. I've literally, I've been in the business for over 30 years, and I forgot the name of the FAFSA. But the thing that I like to point out to families is its first name is free. Free application for federal student aid. So there's never any fee attached to filing the FAFSA. If you happen on a fake website, and it does happen, if they're asking for a fee to file your FAFSA, you need to exit the application immediately. Make sure you're using links either from MIFA or from a school, or that it ends in .gov. Okay? There's no fee. Its first name is free. It's required by all colleges if you are applying for federal student aid. It becomes available October 1st, which means it's already out. I will say that when you are logging in to file a FAFSA for this year, when you log in, there will be 2 active years. The 22-23 year is still active for students who are in college now or who are attending in January. If your student is applying for September, you want to be completing the 23-24. So there are 2 tabs. Make sure you click on the right tab. You can log in with an FSA ID. If you don't have one, there's an opportunity to get one at the end. But that is how you and your student will sign the FAFSA. So at least one parent and each student filing a FAFSA will have to have an FSA ID in order to sign that. Keep them in a safe place and make sure you write down your passwords and any of the save keys that they have you create. That's one of the big obstacles that we run across. So in our office, we have a FAFSA lab where families can come in and fill out the FAFSA. They can use the computer. They have a question, we come over, we help them. But the biggest obstacle that we find is not that they can't get through the application. It's that FSA ID and the passwords and the save keys. That's where people kind of get a little bit hung up. So make sure you're keeping those in a safe place. Use the IRS data retrieval tool if you are able to do so. That has to do with verification, but it also makes it very, very easy for your FAFSA to be very accurate. There are some families who cannot use the retrieval tool, and it's basically if their marital status, current marital status, doesn't match the marital status on the tax return that they're using, there wouldn't be a match there for whatever reason. I'll talk about that a little bit more. However, if you can use the retrieval tool, highly recommended. It'll just log you into the IRS, pull all of your information back, and plunk it right into the FAFSA. You don't have to pull out your return and try to find where's my adjusted gross income and where's my tax paid. It'll just be right there for you. All right. The FAFSA must be completed every year. So this year you're getting lots of help because your students are brand new and you've got the guidance helping you and everybody's kind of doing things in groups, but you're going to be on your own next year. And I will say that colleges communicate with the student only. We don't send reminders to the parents, so you really want to stay on that. Okay, every October 1, that's when it opens up. And so the next one is, oh, that was very nice. True. So what is on the FAFSA anyway? So there's general information, things that you would naturally expect, your student's name, birth date, social security number. You want to be sure that students are using the name that is actually on their social security card because school, and they want to use the same name on their admission application. You might be a little surprised to learn that we get a lot of mismatches where students will use either a nickname or not quite the same name. And then we have a lot of trouble matching those up. So be very careful about that. Make sure it's the student's legal name. Information about citizenship status for the student and the parent. If you happen to be a parent who's not a citizen and you don't have a social security number, you can just use zeros. But you would not be able to obtain an FSA ID because it is directly connected to the social. But there's always an opportunity to print the application and sign. And so the colleges where the student is applying, there's a place at the end to list all the colleges that you want their information sent to. For parents, we're talking about married parents, including same-gender parents, all parents who live together, so both parents, biological parents of the student, whether they're married or not. For divorced or separated parents, we're looking for either the single parent or the couple with whom the student lives. So if we have a single mom who's now remarried, was a single mom, now remarried, that would be the custodial home. So it would be mom and her current spouse. That's who would go or the opposite. That's who would go on the FAFSA. A legal guardian is not considered a parent. So if a student has been appointed a legal guardian before the age of 18, they would be considered independent. There would be no parent information required at all. And if you happen to be the parents, the legal guardian of a student, you are not required to report your information on the FAFSA. So that student would be completely independent. And then, of course, the number in household and the number of students attending college. And then the next slide is, and then we're looking for financial information, which would be for both the student and the parent. And this is based on the 2021 income for the 23-24 FAFSA. A few years ago, the feds changed it to what they call prior year. It used to always be the year before. But they found that a lot of families were missing the priority deadlines because they didn't have their taxes filed. So they go back 2 years now with the idea that most people have those taxes filed. But what that presents itself as, there can be a lot of changes in that many years. And so if that, there's another slide that I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'll just put that on hold for a second. So we're looking at 2021 income, both taxable, untaxed income, parent and students' assets, and that includes savings, checking, investments, other property, like a second home, a 529 plan. So if your student has a 529 plan, you would report that under the parent's assets as opposed to the student. And it's actually treated much more favorably that way. And the idea is that generally it's not the student who's been investing their own funds over the years. It's usually a parent who's put money into the 529. So it counts a lot better when it's under the parent's asset. You would not include the value of your primary home or the value of your retirement. So if you have a 401k or a 403b, you may be asked to report the amount of untaxed income that you put into it for the year, but you're not reporting the whole value. Okay? And you're not reporting life insurance or the value of a small family business. And by that they mean if your family business has less than 100 full-time employees, less than that, that would be considered a small family business. So not required to report anything about that. There's no debt information that's reported on the FAFSA except if it relates to some sort of asset. So if you had a second home, that's an investment, and that home was worth $400,000 market value, and you owe $200 on it, you would do the math, and your value would be $200. It's the net value. That's the only time that we look at debt on the FAFSA. And then, so the other financial aid applications could be the CSS profile. Has anyone tackled the profile? Anyone heard about it? A few people have.
No, actually, I had a question about.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
The FAFSA application, if you're divorced, is that just one application for where the child lives with mom or dad?
So the question is, in a case where divorced parents, if the student lives with only one parent, that would be the custodial parent. The other parent is not required to put their information on the FAFSA.
Even if there's joint custody?
Even if they're,
okay.
right. It would be it's either the parent with whom the student lives or the parent who provides the most support.
Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome. And that brings up the profile because they are going to ask for different information. So schools that use the profile, there is a charge for that. But there, of course, you can see here there's a waiver. It's already out. It became available October 1st. Non-custodial parent, generally information is required on the profile. So not the FAFSA, but the profile. So the non-custodial parent submits a separate profile, and the school is the only one that can look at both applications. They're private from the from the two parents. There may be a college financial aid application. They're kind of rare. We don't really see that too often anymore. But again, check the website, find out what's required. So if you're trying to file the profile and you're listing all of your schools and you say, oh, I want to send it to Bridgewater and I can't find them on here, that's because we don't require it. So there's a drop-down box, and if your college is not listed for the profile, that means they probably don't require it. But you'll know that by checking the website. Okay, and I'm going to talk about why schools use the profile in a minute. So after you apply, the colleges that you list on your FAFSA and the state in which you live will receive your information electronically. Excuse me. That's one of the things that I do. A couple of times a week, I bring the FAFSAs in from the federal mailbox, match them up to the students that we have, and that's how schools do it. The student will receive a student aid report. That's their output document. They'll get it by mail or email. Most students are providing an email address, so they'll get it basically by email. You'll want to contact the financial aid office with special circumstances. There isn't a place, oh, I'm sorry.
Why is the information sent to the state on top of the colleges?
So the question is, why is the information sent to the state as well as the colleges? That's because the state has financial aid to offer to students who reside in their state. So they evaluate eligibility for state programs. Yeah.
But is that then driven by the college's decision, or is that separate, like you'll get something from the state saying, here?
So the student will receive an award notice from the state, and it's up to the school to filter that through the system and make sure that the student meets all the eligibility requirements for any state aid that's offered.
But is that part of the package that comes from the college, or is it a part of the package that comes separate?
So the state aid would be part of the package that comes from the college, even though it's being initiated by the state. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. And I saw a hand here.
Yeah, can you repeat about the CSS profile? Is it state-based? What is CSS actually? FAFSA was pre-application for federal.
Right.
What is CSS?
So the CSS profile is required by some schools that have a lot of money to award to students. So it requires different information. They may ask for the non-custodial parent. They may ask about the value of your primary home. They may ask you about your retirement plan. And the reason that they do that is because they're giving away their money and a lot of it. So they want to really look into the health of the family instead of just taking whatever the FAFSA has. Because the FAFSA is getting shorter and shorter all the time. They don't really dig in too much. But if a school is giving away a lot of their money, they want to dig in a little deeper and see, what's really going on with the family.
And that's maintained by state or federal, or is it completely different?
That's
organization?
only by the particular school. So it's not for federal aid or state aid. It's only for institutional money. Yeah.
I will say, I think the majority of, usually public schools.
Public schools don't
require
require
But
it.
a lot of the private institutions do.
Yeah.
So if you have some private schools on your list, I would suggest just checking those the websites under the financial aid tab, and it will list right there whether they require the CSS profile or not.
Yep. Thank you. So again, contact the financial aid office with any special circumstances. So that's kind of what I was alluding to when I talked about income from 2021. If there's been a drastic change in the family's circumstances, I mean, sometimes there's divorce or separation, sometimes the death of a parent, or one or both parents lose part of their employment or all of it. Those are the things that you'll want to notify the financial aid office about and let them read through your letter and then take action from there. The FAFSA is only asking you for very basic information, but if you have something special or unique going on, write a letter to the school and let them guide you through the steps, because there are different things that we can do for that. Sometimes we can just take the 2000, for this year, it was required 2020 income, but if 21 was less, we can just go in there and replace it. The families are not allowed to do that, but the school can exercise professional judgment and replace that income, and thereby increasing the eligibility of the student. So we do that on a regular basis. So if that's the case, colleges may request federal verification documents. just to kind of verify what was going on originally and to look to see what's changed, and we get the best verification that we can. And then we'll review the applications and determine the financial aid awards. That's kind of how it all works. And then verification, okay, I briefly mentioned this before. Sometimes the federal processor will select an application for verification, and if that's the case, every school that's listed on your FAFSA will be required to fill out or perform the verification for your student. And this is why I was talking about staying organized. So if you've got, 5 or 6 schools that you're trying to send documents to, you want to be very cognizant of where you're sending it, the date that you sent it, and just kind of keep track of what you've done. So a verification could be a tax return, verification worksheet, and asset account statements in some cases. If you were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you won't have to send your tax return. It makes it a lot easier. And the verification worksheets are provided by the school. And it just really is looking to see who's in the household, who's being supported. Make sure that you're reviewing all correspondence from the schools. If you think you're getting multiple requests from a certain school and you're like, why does Bridgewater keep asking me for that? Sometimes what will happen is we'll look at a document that's been submitted and something doesn't really make sense and we can't really figure out what's going on. So we'll send out a subsequent request with a form that's a little different but kind of looks the same. So we do get that a lot. Just make sure you're following up. A phone call will do it, or an email. Log into the college web portal for communications. Again, the colleges are only going to be communicating with the student. So if you can kind of get yourself some kind of an agreement, at least at first, where everybody has access to what's being required, that would be very, very helpful. You could create a family email address for the financial aid process, especially at the beginning. That way everyone is getting the same information. And so, learn about your financial aid office. You want to kind of find out who they are, how do they work. A lot of colleges will divide students by caseload, so you stay with the same financial aid counselor throughout the years. It's kind of a nice way of doing things. Find out about financial aid renewability criteria, if it's financial, if it's academic. If your student were to receive a private scholarship after they receive their award letter, how would that affect their aid package? Those are some questions you might want to ask. And how will the 24-25 FAFSA changes affect financial aid? So we already know that there are some changes coming down the pike. The feds are big into the simplification of the FAFSA, and they're kind of changing some things around. So there are going to be some changes coming. It's not etched in stone yet. We have a lot of training coming up on that. But it's just kind of something to keep in the back of your mind. And I think the next slide kind of goes over some of the changes. Ask about special considerations. Changes in the family circumstances, absolutely. You want to be communicating about that. Or sometimes, can you appeal your offer? Well, I would say you can appeal your offer at any time. But sometimes it helps if you're specific. It's like, oh, Johnny is really set on going to Bridgewater. And if we had like $2,000 more, we'd be ready to commit. Or something to that effect. Or just, we missed the deadline and it's because we had a funeral, a family emergency, whatever that case may be. So just communicate, and you can appeal. You don't always get approved, but it never hurts to try. Sometimes what will happen for students who appeal for additional funds is, this is the way it works. So schools are allotted a certain amount of money, and we spend all of it, and we overspend, knowing that some students are not going to be coming. And so once we get the whole filter on who's coming and who's not, then we can reallocate those funds to students who've asked for a little more. So that's kind of how we do it at Bridgewater. And I suspect that a lot of other schools do the same thing. So you can contact your financial aid office, phone call, email. If they offer chat, you can do that. I would say if you're going to do that, try to do it early on in the summer. You don't want to wait until the very end of the summer, the beginning of September, because honestly, we get very, very busy. And you'll be on hold for a while, or it might take a couple of days for someone to get back to you in email. If you have questions and you really think you can handle it all at the beginning of the summer, that would be really the best time. before it gets overwhelming. And so these are some of the FAFSA changes. Again, not etched in stone. We really don't know what's exactly going to happen, but they're trying to make the form simpler, shorter, asking fewer questions. The expected family contribution will become student aid index. Different terminology, kind of means the same thing. Divorced or separated parents. So it's the parent who provides the most support that will be listed on the FAFSA, as opposed to this year where it's the student with whom the parent with whom the student lives. Number of students in college will not be considered in the SAI or the student aid index. That's a change for next year. And some forms of income will not be reported as untaxed, but rather as an asset, like child support. That's kind of a rumor. I've heard like a bunch of different things on that. So again, not etched in stone. Resources like a 529 or education savings plan from someone outside, other than the parents, will no longer be reported. And look for information on how colleges, how the changes may affect your future financial aid office. The biggest one is not asking about the number of students in college. That's the one that has the biggest effect. So if you've got 2 in college, and next year they're not going to ask, that could have a big impact on those students' student aid index. So contact the school and just let them know that you've heard about it and what is the school doing. We are already preparing for that at Bridgewater. We don't want to do any kind of bait and switch. We get it. We know how that works, and we'll probably like grandfather people in at first. You can sign up for those MIFA emails. You can stay in the loop. They're usually the first ones out with the information. And so how the decisions are made, I really want to stay on track here. So we're looking at the cost of attendance. All right, so that's like the big bucket that we use at first. And those, the cost of attendance has several components in it. So what you would expect, tuition and fees, room and board, whether or not your student lives on campus, there'll be a cost in there. Books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. I just want to back up a second. So the cost of attendance may not be an actual bill. You'll always get a bill for tuition and fees, that goes without saying. But if your student is not living on campus, so if they're a commuter, within the cost of attendance will be a smaller cost for room and board, because we know they're living and eating somewhere, and they're using electricity, and they're doing all those things. So there is a cost, but it's not a charge. Okay, there's a difference between a cost and a charge. So when we look at the cost of attendance, we consider that students will have to buy books and supplies. We don't necessarily charge them for that. They have to get back and forth to school, but we don't charge them for that. And then those personal expenses, you know, getting that dorm room together and all the other stuff they need, is an expense that they will experience, but it's not part of the bill. What is part of the bill is tuition and fees, room and board if the student lives on campus. But we include all of that when we figure out how much it's going to cost. All right? So that's the cost of attendance. And the next piece is this year it's still the expected family contribution. And the federal government describes it this way. It's the amount that the family has, the ability that they have to absorb for 1 year of college costs. The same formula is used for every family. Some colleges will also use the institutional EFC, and that's the profile. So for federal aid, every family will have an EFC that's determined by using the FAFSA formula. But when you're looking at institutional aid, if the college uses the profile, you will have a different EFC because they're asking for different information. Okay? And that's the difference between the profile and the FAFSA. The premise is that the family has the primary responsibility for paying, but it's not necessarily what the family will pay because of those indirect expenses and so on. It's lower for this coming year if there's more than one child in college. And I hate saying that when I just said they were going to eliminate it in the future, but that's what it is right now. If you're really dying to find out, you can use the EFC calculator, but you really don't need to because the FAFSA is already out. So you can just fill out the FAFSA and find out. So here's the formula. We take that cost of attendance using your direct expenses and your indirect. We subtract the EFC, expected family contribution, And the result is the eligibility. And that's how we build a financial aid package. We use this formula. Very, very standard formula. So the cost of attendance, I just want to back up a little bit. So at Bridgewater, we have students who live on campus, students who commute from their parents' home. So we have two different costs of attendance for those students because their costs are much less. And the same would be for any other college as well. Students who live off campus, on campus, or with their parents. So the costs can vary. The expected family contribution stays the same, and then the eligibility depends on the cost. So this is one of those pling, pling, pling. Yeah. So what we're looking at here is financial aid awarding for a college that costs $45,000 with an EFC of $5,000. And they do this to keep the math nice and simple for the presenters, okay? So what would happen in an example like this is when we build up a package, we first subtract out the EFC, and then we start building in some grant and scholarship. So this is a nice little offer here with grant and scholarship. So a grant could be federal grants, state grants, institutional money, perhaps a scholarship down here. This could be merit aid. We don't really know what it is. That's put in first. And then we're going to, you're going to see this $5,500 student loan. That's the federal student loan that a freshman can borrow. And then we have work study, an offer of work study for $2,000. And in this example, there's $5,000 worth of unmet need. That could be filled in if the student receives a private scholarship somewhere else, or perhaps part of that is those non-billable expenses. So it may not be an actual cost that the family has to pay. And then we're going to talk about quickly net price calculators. This is a little tool that you can use on the college's website to find out what your aid package could possibly be. It'll ask questions about the finances and the student's academics, and it'll provide you with a personal estimated net college price. So it'll build in an award and kind of tell you what the bottom line is there. It's only as accurate as the information that you put in, but it will display federal institutional aid, and it could possibly even include merit aid, depending on the student's GPA and what kind of questions they're asking. All right. So this is where I really like to draw your attention to. So award letters, the offers can vary from school to school, even if everything is exactly the same, and that's what this demonstrates. So the cost is the same, it's that $45,000, we got 5,000 EFCs, we have eligibility of $40,000. So school A is giving a really nice grant and scholarship offer. You've got your student loan in there, your work study, and there's actually no unmet need at the bottom. It's very, very rare that a school will completely meet a student's need, but there are some schools out there. And then college B, again, you've got a nice offer of grant and scholarship, you've got your student loan, you've got your work study, you've got a nice total in there, but you have some unmet need here at the bottom. And then it kind of goes on. So they really can vary. It depends on the endowment of the school, how much money they're actually awarding to students, and all of those things. So one of the things that you want to start talking about is, what happens if you get these three offers, and this is the sweatshirt that they already bought, swag, and they're wearing it to the kitchen table as you're trying to figure it all out. That's a scary thing. So you kind of want to think about those things and maybe, have some conversations before it gets too close. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening. So the next slide, I really want to draw your attention to this one. So this is where the bottom line on all of these is exactly the same, but where I want to really hone in is this line right here. See this parent loan? So we have our college A, which is that typical one that we looked at before. So we're not really concerned with college A. College B is still giving us a nice amount of grant money here, the loans. But look at the parent loan here and here. So if you did not apply for a parent loan and you see it on there, there's A, no guarantee that you will be approved for it. B, you may not even want the loan. But what some colleges will do is build this in to show you how you could afford their school. Okay, so what I really want to do is draw your attention to the different sources of aid. So anything that says loan, whether it's a student loan, a parent loan, an alternative loan, if it's on that award letter and you have not applied for it, you really want to start looking at that, okay? Now, I'm not trying to disparage the parent loan program. It's a great loan, it really is a great loan program. And that's not the point here. Lots of parents do apply for the parent loans, and they're wonderful loans. But if you didn't apply for it, and you weren't intending on applying for it, this is a way that colleges have of showing you how their school can be afforded by you. So just watch out for that. Just really pay attention to whether it's grant, scholarship, or loan. So anything that says loan, obviously, is going to be repaid, depending on who the borrower is, of course. All right, so here's our, we're getting to the end over here. I think I'm pretty much on time. So in this particular case, we have a big balance due, okay? So the favorite school maybe didn't really give a whole lot of money, but they honed it down, and that's the choice. So it would be very nice if students and parents began saving, and I always like to say it's never too early or too late to start saving for college. So sometimes a student in their senior year will get a summer job, and they'll be able to save up some money to either put towards their bill or even to help them pay for books. And then parents can start saving now too, and perhaps it's already happening, but if it's not, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Paying from current income. Most schools will offer a payment plan. So you'll look at your total bill minus any financial aid, and if there's a balance there, you can use an installment plan to pay as you go. So usually it's divided between the fall and spring. So you get billed one semester at a time, so you do a 4-month for the fall and a 4-month for the spring. Kind of like college on layaway, although people don't really do that anymore. And then paying from future income would be an education loan, which again is not a bad thing. But if you think about if you weren't doing any of these other things, how much more the loan would be. So anytime you're borrowing a loan, you're always going to be paying interest back. You always want to be thinking about the future. You know, where are you going to be when that loan becomes due? How much interest is accruing on it over time? So those are the things that you really want to look at. So here are some other kitchen table conversations. Would starting at a community college save significant money? It absolutely does, okay? But it's not for everyone, and we all know that. You know, not everyone wants to start at a community college and then end up or transfer over to a 4-year school. But there are some real benefits for it, okay? Perhaps like when my daughter went to school, she had no idea what she wanted to do, just like me, I didn't know either. I said, why don't you go to the community college and kind of figure it out, get your English and your history and all that stuff out of the way, and then figure out what it is that you're doing. And it really does save significant money. If a student completes their 2 years at a community college and then transfers into the 4-year state school, there are a lot of benefits there. There's automatic acceptance, automatic acceptance of, their transfer credits. Excuse me, I'm starting to lose my voice now. So there are a lot of benefits there, but again, like I said, it's not for everyone. Think in terms of total enrollment, 4 years or more. You want to think about your total debt. Research the potential starting salary for the career that your student is going to be studying. So first-year teachers and maybe social workers, they don't really make top-of-the-line salaries. So if you're at a private school and you're paying private school tuition, and when perhaps you could do a social work program at a state school and save some money, you really just kind of want to think about where you're going to be. The income for the intended career, and is the student considering graduate school? So if they are, then you're extending their education another 1 or 2 years. So the interest is accruing on those loans again. A lot of times there's no grant money for graduate school, so that's usually loans. Just want to think about all these. If you do plan to borrow from a private loan, know your credit score, figure out what it is now, and then try to improve it. The better the score, the better the interest rate, generally. And then compare the net price after financial aid offers are received. You'll have a lot of time to do that. The offers are going to start going out probably December, January, February, March, you're going to be seeing a lot of activity with all of that. And then I think, so this is if you decide to do a community college, you have the mass transfer, which makes it very easy to transfer from a community college to the state school. Tuition breaks, this is like a New England regional break, so if a student is going to school, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, there's a few others, if their state school does not offer a particular program, they get a tuition break at the other state school, for instance. We have a lot of students that come from out of state to get into our aviation program, and they get the tuition break there. Okay, and I think here's some free resources. There's the FAFSA Day. You can register to attend one of those sessions where you'll get help, hands-on help filling out your FAFSA. They're offered in English and Spanish. Educational opportunity centers, they're all over the state. You want to go there, you have questions, they'll help you over there. And then this, I think, is a timeline. Nope. What you can do now, you can apply for that FSA ID. At least one parent and each student would need one. Research the deadlines. I know I said that so many times. Register for some other webinars. You don't want to just take my word for everything, okay? Try to do something else. Listen to a blog or sign up for a webinar. Just kind of be careful, you know, with the blogs, because anybody can do one. So you want to make sure that they're valid. Register for the, or reference the timeline for colleges and admissions, so you'll kind of really have a great idea of what's going on. And remember what I said, make sure you keep your FSA ID and your save keys in a nice, safe place. And this is staying on track for your senior year, which I really think is kind of more the guidance counselor. But it's kind of a nice little block of what you can do there. And do I have one more slide? I think it was one more slide, right? Okay, so if you want to, we can go back to that other one afterwards. If you want to connect with MIFA on social media, you can do it in a number of ways. You can do, you know, LinkedIn and all of these YouTube and tweets and Facebook and all of that stuff. The only thing they don't do is TikTok. So I was at the training, and one of the people in the audience said, "Oh, are you guys on TikTok?" And then the presenter said no, and he's like, "Surprise, you are now." So yeah, don't do that to me. So if you want to back up one, and if you want to talk about the timeline, I think, does anybody have any questions that they feel would be helpful for the group? Okay. Well, I must. Oh, yay! Okay.
About two things, parent loans and student loans. So students can only apply for FAFSA? That's it.
So are you talking about parent loan and student loan?
Yes.
Okay. So when the student completes the FAFSA, they're automatically applying for federal loans.
Correct.
Not required to take them, but they're applying for them. If alternative loans are needed to kind of meet that special school that they just have to go to, the student or the parent could be the borrower, okay? Most times when students are younger and they're applying for their own private loans, they need a cosigner because they don't have the credit score to be approved. Now, I will say this. There are some private loans out there who have a feature called cosigner release. So if you, as a parent, say, okay, you know what, Johnny, this loan's going to be in your name, but we'll cosign for you to get you the loan. The cosigner release feature means once the student goes into repayment, so 4, 5, 6 years down the road, they agree to make a certain number of on-time payments, and once that happens, the cosigner can request to be released from their obligation. So you would not be obligated on the loan for the next 10 or 15 years, whatever the repayment plan is, but you could be released from that. That's cosigner release. Now, most schools will have a website where you can compare and contrast. So they'll list a number of alternative lenders that they typically will do business with. So look for cosigner release if you think that you would want to cosign for a loan to help your student. On the other side of that, there are parent loans. So if the parent is the main borrower, the parent can borrow like one of the MIFA loans, or they can do the PLUS loan, which is the parent loan for undergrad students. The student has no obligation to repay those loans at all. They're strictly in the parent's name, and they're credit-based. The PLUS loan has the easiest approval rate. They have a minimum requirement. If a parent is approved for the PLUS loan, everyone gets the same interest rate, same terms, everything. Whereas some of the other alternative loans, the higher the credit score, the lower the interest rate. So it's worth looking around to see what's out there. Did that answer your
She
question?
did, thank you.
Oh, good.
Like, who are the lenders for those parent loans?
Who are the lenders?
Like,
So there's a lot of them out there, and I'm sure everyone's heard of Sally Mae, but they're not the only game in town. I'm just going to say that, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about them at all. But look around. There are a lot of other lenders, and the college should have a list that you can select from, but you're not obligated to just pick that. If you find something on your own, you can do that. But there's lots of different loans out there. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
So are the parent loans similar to federal, student loans deferred?
So the PLUS loan, the parent loan for undergrad students, is a federal loan for parents. That's the easiest one for approval. So the federal government would be the lender.
Are those deferred for those 4 years or like parent?
So the interest rate is set every year, every July 1. So the interest rates could differ from year to year, but they would be fixed for the life of the loan. Good questions. Yes?
On the FAFSA form, is it, how hard is it to add or subtract schools? You know,
Oh,
so
thank
you're
you for
talking
asking.
about, you know, you're sending out 5 different schools and all of a sudden you get verification from 5 and you only, you know, your kid only wants to go to 3. I mean, is it better to put fewer schools or more schools?
So the question is about the number of schools listed on the FAFSA. So if your student has listed 5 schools and then they hone it down to 3, you can just let those other schools go. You don't really need to do anything. You don't need to respond to their verification. It's nice if you let them know that you're no longer interested, but you're not obligated to do it. The question that I get more often is, what if there's not enough spaces to list the number of schools that we want the application sent to? So you list as many schools as you want on your initial FAFSA. It gets processed within 2 to 3 days, and then you log back in and add more schools.
Unlimited.
I'm sorry.
Unlimited, so.
Unlimited. Absolutely unlimited.
I think initially, is it 10?
You know, it used to be 10, it might be 8. We don't really see that part of it, so I'm not exactly sure.
I think from what I've seen, it's 10 and
You
then-
can remove schools and add schools.
Yeah.
But once you've listed a school and your FAFSA has been processed, even if you take them off for subsequent transactions, they're still on that first one. You're not really taking them off completely. You're just taking them off of any subsequent transactions. And we get a lot of subsequent transactions. Sometimes we get 8 to 10 from a certain student, from one student. Anybody else?
And are there any pluses and minuses sending a FAFSA form to?
To more schools, pluses and minuses, so pros and cons?
Yeah.
Not really. It's just that the student will receive requests from every school that they've listed there. So if there's a school they're like, I'm not really interested in going to Bridgewater, but I'll just throw them on there. They'll get notices from us. So they'll just get more emails from the schools. That's kind of a con, I guess, right? Yeah.
And how you decide on honors college in Bridgewater?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Honors college at Bridgewater, how you decide who goes to honors?
So are you talking about the merit scholarships at Bridgewater?
I think just the honors.
The honor scholarships?
The honors.
I'm glad you asked. I actually brought a list, which I would be more than happy to hand out. So this year, we're offering a slew, if you let me use that word again. Mom, what are you doing here? Of merit scholarships, okay? We are really ramping up our game and trying to bring in students with good GPAs. If you're interested in Bridgewater, I'd say, or even if you're not, you might be after you read this. Take a look at this, and these are determined by the admissions office. So any student who applies and is accepted can qualify for these scholarships, regardless of financial need. And we're not that expensive, so this is kind of a nice little cushion to put on there. Okay, I'm going to leave this over here.
I think to follow up on your question, I'm not sure, Diane, if you know this, is in terms of the eligibility for the honors.
Oh, the honors program?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't quite get that. Because I don't work in admissions.
Oh,
So I have to say I don't know. Sorry.
Any other questions for Diane?
I'll stick around if anybody has something private that they want to ask. I usually, get a couple of questions here and there. Okay?
I'm happy to also answer any college admissions questions if you have any. I will be here. Yes,
I have a question, as far as retaking the SAT,
yes.
do you suggest that, my son is under the impression he doesn't have to because he wants to do the early action, I think it's a good idea.
So that's like the hot question. A lot of colleges right now are test optional. I would say, who is your son's guidance counselor, do you know? We'll figure that out. So usually, if your student is at or above that school's average SAT, I say send it. If they're below, I say don't send it. I just had a bunch of I talked to Notre Dame this week. I talked to UNC, UVA, all about like whether or not to send the SATs or not. Those top tier schools, if you don't have like within the 1500s, they said do not send because they can't unsee what you send, basically. So they just, if you don't meet what their average is or above, it's don't send. They will take other things from the student's application and weigh that heavier. So by not sending something is not gonna hurt your student. They truly mean test options.